Award-winning chef and author Sean Sherman is an Oglala Lakota citizen, but he's more popularly known as the Sioux Chef, a nod to the indigenous cuisine he spent a lifetime perfecting. Raised on a reservation in South Dakota, he moved to Minneapolis after college, and in 2021 opened the restaurant Awamney. His goal? Reclaiming an important culinary culture long buried and often inaccessible. Restaurant goers and critics took notice, and in June, the James Beard Foundation awarded Owamney the best new restaurant in the United States. Thanks for joining us, Sean. Let me get right to it. How hard was it to launch an indigenous cuisine restaurant, and did you expect success to come so quickly?
Well, we knew we had a pretty good base. We knew we were doing something different. We knew about the followers that were around us and the support that's been around us. So we knew that people would definitely want to come in and try it, just being as unique as it is. But it was hard to say how long that would last, and it's still going right now, so that feels pretty good.
That's amazing. And I hear that you sold out from the get-go.
Oh yeah. When we first opened, before we even opened, we opened up the Resi app for reservations, and we oversold a little bit, but we sold 4 months out without even, in just moments, and we've been sold out every single night since last July in 2021 when we opened the doors.
Why do you feel that Awamney resonated with both restaurant goers and the critics so much?
Well, obviously it's something completely unique. It's something completely different. I can't think of another restaurant out there exactly like us across probably North America in general. And just with our intention, with our focus of just raising awareness towards indigenous peoples and issues and flavors and cultures, and utilizing native languages on the menus, and having native music playing over the loudspeakers, and all and most of our staff. We had 120 employees this summer, and probably 70% of our staff identified as indigenous in one way or another. And it's just a very unique space, and for people coming from indigenous communities, it's not a normal occurrence. Like, you don't get to go out and see all that, so we've had people be like, oh, this must how Italians feel when they walk into an Italian restaurant, So it's just been really touching to so many people to be able to have this experience. And I think it touches on lots of different interests of people, because we use a lot of foods, we utilize a lot of farm to table, very heirloom, indigenous garden varietals of things like corns and beans and squash coming from many different native nations. So much intentionality, even like our wine list is indigenous when it comes down to it. So I think people are just really interested in what we've been able to put together.
You also mentioned that your staff is 70% native. Is cultivating and maintaining a native staff something that's important to you?
Well, we're just trying to bring a lot of opportunity towards some of our indigenous communities, because, we're a minority community here in Minnesota and Minneapolis, but we do have a large native community. And to be able to see a restaurant, with native people serving the food and native people cooking the food, it's a unique situation. And we want to grow more indigenous leaders as we kind of continue to move forward. So we want to see more indigenous creativity coming out of the culinary team. We want to see more leadership coming out of the front of the house team. And we just want to develop, more leaders for future generations, and especially if we have the opportunity to help create more restaurant and food operation systems, we want to be able to help build a base to be able to maintain that also.
You describe your menu as decolonized. What does that mean, and how is it different from how Americans eat today?
To understand a decolonized diet, I guess first you should just understand what colonialism means, So it's a policy or practice of acquiring partial or full political control over another area, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. So basically moving into a space and extracting whatever you deem as valuable for profit, laying waste to whoever the indigenous population and even the landscape and environment is, right? So we've seen that happen all over the world, and it's not, a very unique situation anywhere, but we've seen colonialism happening for a long time. To decolonize something, we just think about going against that system, and we think about trying to really showcase what was true to these land spaces and really highlight a lot of the cultures that are still here. So we removed European ingredients that were brought over and introduced, and really focused on foods that have been here for a long time that the indigenous communities have been utilizing for countless generations. So a lot of Native American heirloom agricultural products, a lot of wild food, of course, everywhere, a lot of wild game and birds and fish, and even insects, And we're not trying to cook like it's a timepiece and recreate something from the past. We're just trying to understand the knowledge of our ancestors, create a modern day indigenous pantry, and have modern day indigenous creativity, create new dishes for people to try that still resonate and tell a story of the indigenous cultures of where these foods come from.
A lot of the food served at your restaurant is sourced from indigenous people. How hard is it to source indigenous food, and do you see that changing in the future?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job because we've been doing it for a while. Because I formed my company, the Sioux Chef, in 2014, and we opened up a food truck first in 2015, and I started doing a lot of catering. And we did a lot of catering all the way up to the pandemic, basically, before, the pandemic kind of knocked all of that stuff down. But, we spent quite a few years just figuring out how to source and how to utilize. And so we get a lot of steady products that we're able to build a lot of menu around. So a lot of dried corns of different colors and cornmeals and a lot of different varietals of beans. In the summer we get a lot of heirloom just agricultural produce. So we utilize some native farms nearby us. We get a lot of proteins, all of our bison comes from a company called Cheyenne River Bison, which is a Lakota-owned bison herd out there in the middle of South Dakota. We get all of our fish from a couple of Anishinaabe tribes in the north, one from Red Lake in Minnesota and one from Red Cliff in Wisconsin. Each have fisheries, and we're just able to get a lot of really cool product, And it's just that intentionality of purchasing from indigenous local first and then indigenous national next. And then we try to support BIPOC around us, and then we just support local growers around us who have been really good friends and allies for us.
So I read a New Yorker article that some restaurant patrons treat their visit like tourists and want to take pictures with real-life natives. Do you think that way of viewing Native people is harmful, like almost fetishizing the culture?
Yeah, a little bit, and I hope that, we can wake people up a little bit. We are all still here, we're working really hard, we're modern day people, and we have modern day everythings, and, we should kind of be past that a little bit, but, there's a little bit of education that needs to happen with some people because our education system teaches very little about indigenous peoples of the United States, and especially doesn't really dive into just what we had to go through just to be here and to be alive today, So I'm hoping that, this kind of restaurant with the amount of attention that it's getting is really getting people curious to learn and educate themselves a lot more on indigenous peoples and communities, especially of where they may live.
In generations to come, what would you like people to think about when they hear the name, the Sioux Chef?
I just hope that they just take the time to do a little research, to see some of the work we've done, to see some of the videos we've created, maybe to find the cookbook that we released a few years ago, and just to start to, again, we just want to expose indigenous people and communities out there so people are aware of indigenous communities and efforts going on in their own regions, and hopefully finding and supporting indigenous chefs that might be in their regions or indigenous growers or producers, and just really making that part of the topic of conversation here and there.
We've covered a lot of topics today, and ultimately we're here to celebrate Native American history. So my last question for you is, what does Native American Heritage Month mean to you?
Well, obviously it's a great time for people to take a moment to just see that, and it's a great time where we get a lot of asks to be able to do a lot of these talks. And as our platform grows bigger and bigger, we get to see bigger and bigger platforms that we're able to be a part of. And I personally just try to utilize these very intentionally to be able to talk about some of these very serious issues, and also just get people to really take a time to stop and think and be curious and to learn about the indigenous communities of where they stand and the land that they're on.